Welcome to episode 4 of season 2 of Agricola Card of the Week. This week we're looking at the Gamer's deck. The Gamer's deck for Agricola is a very utilitarian expansion. The cards are fairly similar in flavour to the original game, so if you're looking to add a little bit of variety without adding a lot of complexity, it's an easy one to go for. A little bit hard to track down these days, but I did manage to get my copy a few months ago and it's been a welcome addition to our deck. The only thing I really don't like about it is that the cards have this odd colour on the back. The minor improvements are pretty much the same colour as the occupation, and they've got this sort of weird sort of checkerboard effect. That checkerboard effect also is on the front of the cards, which I don't really care one way or the other about that. But when shuffling these cards through with the other decks, as I do, you can see when the Gamers ones are kind of coming up, and I tend to sort of shut my eyes a bit and make sure I don't skew the cards that I'm drawing out. As I've done before, I will be looking at 4 minor improvements and 4 occupations from this deck, just to give you a little bit of a flavour. Proudly sponsored by Yeoman. Available in the App Store now. The potato scoop costs you 2 wood. It's a bit like the grain scoop from the basic game. You can take an extra vegetable whenever you take a vegetable. Probably a bit less useful than the grain scoop. You're not likely to go taking vegetables multiple times, but if you want to do a vegetable strategy later in the game, quite a handy card. The Paddocks allows you to immediately build 4 fences within an existing paddock, so it's up to 4. I have used this to divide a large paddock into 4 smaller paddocks. I'd already actually built the stables there. I think my opponent was wondering why I was building multiple stables inside a large paddock. It's a travelling card, so it goes to the next player, they can use it, although unless they've been building larger paddocks and leaving them to be divided up, it's probably going to be less useful to them. But it's a good card because it's essentially worth 4 wood. It allows you to build a larger stable, a larger pasture early, with the plans of breaking it up later on. I really like that card. The sheepdog doesn't cost you anything, except that each harvest you have to pay the sheepdog 1 food. You can keep up to 2 sheep on each unused space, and I have used this to get 6 or 7 sheep on the go through breeding and collection on the farm. You can, it's basically unlimited. As long as you've got empty spaces, you can keep 2 sheep on those space. You cannot keep any animal other than a sheep in your home. It's another minor restrictions, and you have to beg if you can't feed the dog. But provided you can, feed the dog, it's a great card. And finally, a rather unusual one, the hired helpers. It costs your food, and each round you can basically place a guest marker, have an extra turn that round, but the next round you have 1 less turn. So it's a way of having extra turns now or less turns later. You cannot use the ability in consecutive rounds, obviously it says that on the card, but if you're using that ability this round and you're using 1 less in the next round, it kind of makes sense that you can't then use it again. But a nice way of, especially if you've got that thing where you just want 1 more action now and sacrifice it, get something on the go before a harvest or something. Nice little card, one of those interesting little rule breaky kind of cards that I really like. Moving on to the occupations from the Gamer's deck. The Pearl Seeker. Whenever you use a fishing action space, you get an additional stone. You can also use the stone from that space to buy an additional stone for costs 2 food. So it has to be the food that you're getting off that space, but a nice way of making the fishing action space more useful and getting more stone, especially early on in the game. The Businesswoman, as soon as you play this card, you can play 2 improvements. So you can build 2 improvements, you have to pay for them, but it's a way of going boom boom, 2 improvements in 1 turn. Can be really handy. Nice, basic, simple, straightforward card. Just gives you that extra little leg up when you need it. Nice one. The Stone Pilar, another one that I have actually used. When you build fences or stables, you can use stone instead of wood. Each stone's worth 2 wood. I have used this to good effect. Especially good if you've got other cards that give you stone, but nonetheless often find that wood is more constrained in a game than stone. Stone is like a nice to have, wood is like a have to have, and so sometimes you can think, okay, well I won't do something else that requires stone, I'll use that instead to build fences. And because it's essentially 2 wood for each stone, it's more useful than it first appears. Nice little card. And the final card for the Gamers deck, and the occupation, the Resource Collector. This has had a lot of outings in our games. It's a nice basic card. You take a wood, a clay, a reed and a stone, and you put them on the next 4 round spaces in whatever order you want, only 1 per round. It's really only 4 extra resources. It doesn't seem particularly super useful, but an extra reed is always handy. Stone early in the game, or if you've got a particular minor improvement you want to play, it's a great, again, it's typical of the Gamers deck. It's a nice, simple, basic card that just easy to understand, combos well with other cards. Might just give you those resources you need to do something else. Typical of this deck, not mind-blowing, but just really useful utilitarian. It's a bit hard to track down this now. I did find a supplier. I got my copy a few months ago. Didn't pay the earth for it. I wouldn't pay the sorts of collectors. Some have seen them going for as high as $80. I wouldn't pay that for it. I'm hoping that in doing these series, in some small part, that might contribute to Z-Man Games reprinting some of these cards. I'm pronouncing it Z-Man because I believe they're Canadian, and like us, they have the English alphabet. Look, a great expansion overall. I would rate it a 3rd out of the 4, but only barely just behind the World Championship deck. But still, it's probably going to appeal to a much wider audience than the other ones. Thank you for watching episode 4 of season 2 of Agricola Card of the Week. Next week we move on to some of the more sort of flavourful expansions. We're looking at the Belgium deck. If you run iOS, an iPod or an iPhone, consider buying my app Yeoman to help score your game. We use it every time we play. Makes things nice and easy for everybody, who, even if they're maybe not used to playing the game or don't want to sort of sit down and get into the finer details of the scoring. It just makes it easy for everybody to score their game. Please like or leave a comment below and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. The World Championship deck strikes a nice balance between sort of utilitarianism and kind of novelty. Technically it's 2 decks, it's the Flanders deck and the Wallonia deck, but for most purposes we're just going to refer to it as the Belgium deck. Proudly sponsored by Yeoman, available in the App Store now.